wanted to raise a question on flooding, but I'll just raise a couple of issues out of the report myself. One of the things that I think that the report highlights is that the task force is not really something new that has developed in response to the two subsequent floods that we've just had. It has really been designed to lift out of the work that was being done for the presentation to central government, the work that needs to be prioritised around what the immediate solutions are. So I think that's probably a significant point in the report. So the area-wide mitigation options, which the government asked us to specifically undertake, the work that we were asked to do on that work is continuing, and that will be coming back to council very soon. In fact, I don't know if Terry can give us an update on where the two options are at the moment and when we will be able to bring them back to council for a decision, because we do need to get them in front of central government, because although we've got temporary solutions coming back to us sooner, we do have to sort of make a decision as to whether we're going to go down the track of the bigger solutions, because if we're not going to go down that track, then that changes the dynamic of the temporary solutions as well.
I think I'd like to try and update you. We've got a steering group meeting tomorrow.
Yep.
And we might be able to provide you more information.
Great. Okay, that's good. And the other thing was that I really wanted to kind of clear the air around the residential red zone, because there has been, it is a convenient shorthand for describing a buyout option, which the government used in response to the earthquake. And there were, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 properties that were red zoned. But this was not a land zoning or a land use change that was adopted in that case. It was simply the description of an area of land that was coloured red on a map. That was all it was. It was never a change in our district plan. It doesn't exist in our district plan other than it is an area not covered by the land use recovery plan. And so the future of the residential red zone will be discussed and debated in the next wee while. But what the government decided was that this was land that would not be available for residential purposes for the short to medium term. And there were a number of criteria that they used to decide what would be red zoned, and they included that area-wide mitigation would be required, that a significant number of houses were going to have to be rebuilt, that people would have to be out of the area for a long period of time, and this was the crunch point, the amount of money that would have to be spent on developing the land for rebuilding on outweighed the value of the sections, which is where the 2007 rating valuations came from. That's how they costed it. That's how it was. The land was valued for those purposes. So when I say publicly that we can't red zone, we can't. We don't have the ability to do that. There is no such classification. But what we need to be able to do is to determine where we should retreat, and in some cases that will be permanently, and in other cases it will simply be temporarily. And so, and if we go ahead with these large works in some of these other areas, the land that is then restored will be much more valuable than the land that was there before, because it won't be subject to the flood risk. It'll be restored to the position it was in before the earthquakes, and it will be desirable land in desirable neighbourhoods, as all of these are. So I just think that that's good to have that on the table, to have it fully explained, so that we don't get into the habit of just going straight to a solution without understanding what the particular options might be, which is what we'll get on the 12th of October. So I think we'll be able to advance the discussion then. So 12th of May, sorry, David.
Thank you. Look, just a couple of observations from the executive summary from the acting CEO. Just on the flooding task force, I wonder really, when we look at a lot of comment that's been made in the public arena in recent days about a lot of talk, a lot of consultation, and I see, you know, here we've established a task force, and the task force is going to collaborate with the land drainage recovery team and collaborate with the CERA/CCC flood management steering group, and a lot of consultation, a lot of planning. Where, if any, is there a role for governance, for elected members in that process? I really would like, I get a little frustrated at times when we're sitting on the sidelines, we're wanting to get something going and to be part of a group, to be instrumental to get something up and running is a little frustrating at times. So I don't want to see a lot of what's could be described in the cartoon in this morning's paper, you know, things happening ad hoc all over the place and not much happening. So I'd like some explanation as to where the governance role may fit into that at some stage. And the second, just an observation that as a result of the deputation we had this morning from Graham Walker about the upstream housing developments and the effect on our waterways. And really it is quite an issue, I think, that has happened post-earthquake. It's been exacerbated where we've seen a lot of our commercial and some of our business premises, and to a degree some engineering and things have moved west. Everything's out on the east, out on the west, and there's a huge amount of hard surface, and all that runoff is being created in the west, but the problem's being dealt with in the foothills, against the base of the foothills, and in the eastern suburbs, rivers and catchment areas. So I really do support the notion that we need to be looking at that, the effect of that westward drift and its effect on our drainage plan. And I think he's got a very good point when he's talking about the changes in the channel depths and widths, and we've got to start looking at the fact that a lot of our problems are being now created in the west and having to be dealt with on the other side of the city. So just an observation there that I think we need to be cognizant of going forward.
Ali?
Thank you. I am very appreciative of the work that everyone does, all the staff do. Mike Galuli particularly, I know, has been out on the streets at 4:30 in the morning and staying in touch with the mayor and so forth. What I'd like to know from an elected member's perspective is how we can get some faster responses to inquiries relating to concerns that are directed our way from residents. Monday morning, or was it even Friday morning, I made a request for some streets to be cleaned, for example. And I know we are limited in our resources, but it would certainly help if we could see what the street cleaning plan is. I was very appreciative, as were the residents of D Street and St Albans last night, as a city care cleaner swept the street at 7 p.m, to the point they went out on the streets and cheered and took photographs of the truck and sent it to me. So I don't want to make this sound silly, but the amount of debris and the leaves that are sitting around the streets that are flooding are problematic and will be a problem should there be rain. And we need as elected members to have a much faster response from staff, or should we be directing our inquiries elsewhere when we want to know when streets are going to be cleaned, is there a plan to do so, and so forth.
I think you sent an email to that effect yesterday. Ali, did you asking for the programme?
For the specifics, yes, because when I've asked in the past, is this street being done, is that street being done, could this street be done, I haven't had any response until quite late in the piece. So I thought if I had a plan, I wouldn't have to keep going back to staff on each individual inquiry. I'd be able to respond from a plan.
Yeah. So,
Situations like this.
Terry, do you want to come up to the end? Yeah.
What I advise is if you've got specific issues, we use the current system through the call centre because they can raise CSRs and we can then get the messages out to the appropriate people and the appropriate contractors to actually get work done. That's the best way. That's the system that we've got built within the organisation to deal with that issue. In terms of forward-looking plan, it is really, really difficult because things change minute by minute, hour by hour, because we get calls in. We do get some calls in through the call centre, and then we look at that priority against what we've already got and try and rearrange things. So we can try and put a plan together, but I can guarantee as soon as we put it out, it'll be out of date and it'll change. And that's a sort of, and it takes time and effort to put that into place, whereas actually we could just be out there doing stuff.
I guess what I'm wanting to know is there a standard business as usual street maintenance and cleaning plan that is available for us to look at? Because whether it is just purely anecdotal and can't be backed up, however, I did drive around the streets yesterday, it is quite clear that the streets are not being cleaned and maintained to the standard and level they were 3, 4, 6, 7 years ago.
Well, I perhaps argue I think they are. It's just probably there's this particular time at the moment that there's so much debris with leaves and things around. There is a plan, and I can ask the operational team to see what they can do in terms of providing that information to a wider audience.
I think we need a more detailed report than that. So I think we do need to have an idea about how the standard applies. I mean, we're going to need this for the long-term planning process anyway.
Yeah.
How that standard applies, and then how it applies, and what happens immediately prior to a known weather event that is coming, because I know that things change in that environment.
Exactly.
And what happens immediately afterwards, because I think that some of the clean-up post an event has been part of the problem that we've had to confront this particular time, and it has been because of the three, saturating events, one after the other, that has meant that perhaps the standard hasn't been met. But if we could get a report on that whole, how it works as business as usual, how it happened, what happens immediately prior to, and what happens immediately post, then I think that would give us a really good structured way of looking at how we can feed into the process when it comes up. Does that help? Pauline?
I've actually got two things, but just on the RFS, there's often, you might lodge an RFS, but we're not actually told that it's actually been completed. There needs to be that loop.
Yeah. We actually need to sort this, and it is something that's partly my fault.
no, I can respond to that. We have a system in place where if an elected member puts an RFS in, it gets dealt with differently, and there should be a feedback loop. And if that's not happening, I'll find out why not.
That'd be good. And the other question I have on your report is that in just the very first paragraph, 1.1, I think we should have St Albans and particularly Edgware in there. And I'm thinking about the Edgware Business Centre, where particularly Peter Tim's and KB's Bakery are flooding, and it's having a negative impact on their business. Now, I also note that the master plan is in its final draft, final adopted master plan being prepared. I'm just wondering if part of that master plan is dealing with the footpaths directly outside those shops. If we can have a look at maybe trying to do the two things at once, just investigate that. I think it's worth flagging.
Yep.
Thank you.
Andrew?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, certainly the establishment of the task force is something that's been welcomed by people in the community that I've spoken to, and I welcome the update this morning as well. It's good to see that, you know, good progress has been made there. I just wanted to raise a couple of issues that have been a concern to me, and if the acting chief executive could comment on them, that would be great. The reporting back to council on the 12th of May is excellent, and I appreciate that's a small time frame and there's a lot of work going to need to happen to make that. One of the comments that's come to me from communities is when are we going to report back to them? So requests for community meetings. There was a meeting scheduled for Little River which was postponed as a result of our resolution last week. So I'd like us to be able to get back out to those communities with some confirmed meeting dates, ideally if we can, and again it's going to be down to resource, in the week commencing 12th of May, so that we can be reporting back to communities as quickly as possible. The second point that I'd like to make is really adding to what Ali and Pauline have said around the communications with council and the request for service system, and the front end of that seems to be working fine. As a result of the fact that people are so busy and therefore so thin on the ground in this area, particularly when it comes to technical help that's needed around landslip issues, water flow issues, flooding issues, land runoff, drainage, all of that sort of thing. Jobs are getting logged, but then actually getting staff advice back on them, or staff that have got that knowledge getting back to residents, is clearly slower than residents are expecting it would be, and that's for good reason. So I don't know whether there's something we can do from a communications point of view to intervene in that, so that residents know that we are taking longer than expected to get back to them, but their work is in progress, or whether there's a communications person could be assigned to that area that can update residents or councillors so that we're not taking the technical people off the job to be doing that, or whether we could look at some kind of interface like we did with the consents team when there were lots of inquiries coming into there, so that we can get the front end of it right and leave the people with the technical skills to concentrate on all of this work that needs to be done in the background. I don't know whether you'd be happy to comment on those two issues, Jane.
First of all, the community meetings, I think we can include in the report that comes back a schedule of suggested community meetings, because and that report will, although the meeting's on the 12th, on Friday week, that will be going in the public arena, so that there'll be a signal in there that the meetings are coming up. So I'd suggest, would you be happy if we did it that way?
Yep, that's great. Yep.
In terms of the RFS system, I think all your ideas are good. Leave it with me to come back and just tighten up the system, I think. My understanding is that we've got a turnaround time, but if we're taking longer than that, there should be an intermediary. This is going to take a bit longer, so that people know we haven't forgotten. So I will follow up and confirm back to you what the system is, and just give a reminder to the Customer Services Centre and others in comms working through these things.
Yanni?
So I think about 2 weeks ago I sent a document through around flooding, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, pre-event preparation and prevention, response during event, post-event recovery. The task force isn't going to look at those issues at all. What it's looking at is a more systemic approach, probably around the prevention, but it's not looking at the emergency response or the civil defence response.
Yanni, the task force has been set up to deal with the immediate resolution for people in those areas.
Which is welcome. So how can I, because most of the stuff that my colleagues have raised on the other side of the table, I've already put into a paper that I've sent around. I tried to identify areas, now going down to identifying streets, but it seems to me the gap for us as a council is to learn from these events and put in place some new systems going forward that reflect what we've learned, because clearly there's been some gaps.
That's a very good idea.
So is it, would you like a resolution that does that, or what is the process for that?
We can deal with this as an item of business, but seriously, we need to take a report to central government that actually identifies what we do either in the meantime or permanently or both. Right. And we're not in a position to report on the big option and it may well be that we have to, we're going to have to make the decision on that. So, I mean, I've got no problem with setting up a small working group of councillors to work on your paper, to build it into something that would be worthwhile to take further.
It's just like, you know, at the moment, we could have community groups, residents
I
associations.
don't want to take any staff off what they're doing now. We've got them focused on getting an urgent paper put together.
Right.
I'm happy to put together a small working group of councillors to progress your paper into something that we could then develop into a policy process for the way the council responds in the future.
So can I ask then, is the organisation doing any internal or getting any external review of our flooding response to date? Is that planned in any work program?
My answer is the same as Leanne's. At the moment, it's all hands to the pump to come up with solutions. There will come a time when we do need to look back, and there are learnings. But at the moment, we've got to focus our resources for there's the three things: the 62 land drainage projects, which has been going on for some years.
Yeah.
Second thing is and we've already mentioned it, the engineering solutions for Flockton Basin, which you've had the initial report. Now that we have the task force to do the immediate, and we've just got to get through this task force. There'll be a report for you to deal with a week on Monday. I think that's when the governance comes in. We'll need to discuss where we go next.
So can I ask that the central city is included in that task force? It's not mentioned in here, but we obviously had severe flooding in the central city. Is that going to be included?
No, it's not. And I'm not sure about Edgware. We had to purposely look at the places that we've got on here. I took that at the recommendations of the task force leader, Mike Galuli, in terms of where the worst affected areas were, or the worst affected residents were, and what was actually doable in what's now 7 days.
What we've asked them to do is to come back with a report on the specific causes of flooding in each area, with options about how we address immediate needs on a temporary basis while the longer term solutions are considered. They are the street neighbourhood temporary operational solutions, the individual property level protections, and the relocation solutions for the most vulnerable property owners. This does not stop the longer term work being done. There is an entire drainage solution flood protection program that is ongoing. That work doesn't stop, and in fact the task force simply collaborates with the land drainage recovery team so that their work doesn't stop. But the reason for the task force, and this was reported to the council last week, was to lift the urgent what do we do in the meantime, because we cannot leave people in the situation they're in for the next 2 years. So, I mean, it's all very well to try and add different things to this task force. The task force want to focus on the worst affected residential areas and bring it back to council by the 12th of May. That's a big ask. So I really don't know that it's helpful. I absolutely don't mind if a small group of councillors meet together to discuss your paper and work it up into something that we could work from. I personally would like to see the title turned around the other way, but you know, there's work to be done there. But I don't want to pull anyone from the staff away from what they're doing at the moment.
I think my concern is that if we have another rain event next week, and there's things we could do between now and then to get ready, prepared, clean up the streets, we've done that work so that we don't have a repeat of another event where we've been underprepared and we have the same issues coming again, because all of us are getting pressure from people about certain requests for things, just simple things like drains just being cleaned or a street just being cleaned, that we need to kind of understand where it's at. So I totally support the task force.
The message is well received,
really good.
that staff will be making sure that we are as prepared as we possibly can be. You know, and given the events of the last few weeks, I'm fully expecting that there will be another
And so just
flooding
the final point I
incident.
wanted to make on the central city is the residential area around the Avon Loop, where people still have properties which does get flooding. So just that one specific area seems to have fallen through, but it did get quite bad flooding. So
This is the area that's not been red zoned.
the area that's not being red zone, that's adjacent to the red zone.
Right.
I'm
Ellie?
quite happy to be a part of that group, actually,
Yeah.
if Yanni wants to sit down and talk about that. I think as councillors we can actually be quite proactive and effective in
Absolutely.
our own communities. We're fortunate that we have a very strong group headed by Joe Byrne in the Flockton area. So we are in touch with them constantly through social media, through emailing, they with us. And going through the call centre, going through staff, which must annoy the hell out of the staff because we flick a lot of emails, but we are at least trying to be proactive and get things moving. So I'd just say that. I know you work hard too, Yanni, I'm not suggesting that you don't, but I think if we talk about what we can do, we can replicate some of the stuff that's working on in our ward. The other thing is I'm a little concerned about sewerage.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and I just wonder whether staff could perhaps look at, I've got several emails even just today, pregnant woman who's having to walk around areas with toilet paper and so forth, kids playing on parks that have been inundated by, I want to be really sure that it's safe. Tummy troubles are starting to come up a little bit in one part of Warrington. It could be just because they had a bad curry last night, but they're asking people, are you suffering from the same thing? So can we have some assurance or a report that will...
Terry, could we get a written update on contamination? Is that possible? If we could get it up onto the website so that people can see what the, what the status is in the different areas.
And not just wash your hands. I mean,
No.
it's great information, but we need to know our kids are safe.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, Vicky.
In the flooding task force, I'm assuming that there will be solutions that are household orientated as well as engineering, sort of immediate engineering
Yeah.
fixes.
Yes.
So that if somebody, for example, wants to sell their house, I appreciate the difference with a red zone, but if they want to sell their house and quit an area, that there is a recommendation that the government, for example, buys that pending the remediation, say, in the Flockton area. Or so we
can't
actually
make a recommendation that the government do anything. We can make a recommendation that that a process is available, and that is one of them. One of the, as you can see in the acting chief executive's report, it states that one of them is relocation solutions for the most vulnerable property owners, and that may mean purchasing. But part of the report will have to include where the costs potentially could lie. And that may require a combination of council and central government and EQC and insurance. I mean, there are a number of players in all of this, but until somebody sits down and writes it all down, we don't know what the answer will be. And it does, I know that, people are frustrated by the delay. We don't have all of the levers at our control, and that's why we need to be talking to central government.
And I totally get that central government is saying that it wants to help, so I just want to make that very possible for them.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to hear that the concept of people either relocating temporarily or if they need to, being able to sell their house to some government or other entity so that they can actually move on with their lives rather than face this 3 times a month. That's awesome, as long as the people solutions are in.
I think that was kind of missing from the focus from the report last week about what the task force would do.
I think what we're seeing is very, very frustrated people, and the emphasis needs to be on making life easier for those people and finding solutions for them.
Absolutely.
And the engineering solutions probably mean less to them.
Yeah, but
as
that's not for the
families.
task force.
I totally get that.
The task force is really to lift this out of
Totally get
the engineering solutions.